The road was dark and empty when the car pulled over. No struggle, no panic, just a quiet stop on the side of a rural highway. She stayed in the driver's seat, legs crossed, as if expecting a conversation, not violence. Moments later, another vehicle stopped behind her. One sound shattered the silence. By sunrise, she was dead. And the truth of what happened on that road was far more disturbing than anyone imagined. Are you ready for the darkest stories Britain has to offer? Introducing our new book, Unreal True Crime, British edition. 35 shocking true murder cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or grab your instant PDF download from our website. Links are in the description below. Don't miss out. Get your copy today. And now, let's continue with today's case. Livy Lewis was born in the small East Texas town of Hemphill into a close family that believed in hard work, education, and staying together. She grew up surrounded by pine trees, dirt roads, and relatives who knew every detail of her life. At the center of that world stood her mother, Darcy, and her grandmother, Janice. They watched her move from a serious little girl into a young woman who wanted to build a future far beyond the limits of a rural county. As a child, she often acted older than her years. She liked plans, lists, and routines. She preferred order over chaos and tried to help at home rather than cause trouble. Money stayed tight in the family, so she learned early that every small job and every bill mattered. Relatives remembered a girl who noticed other people's problems and felt a strong urge to help, whether the person in front of her was a younger cousin, an older neighbor, or a stranger in a store. School gave her a place to prove herself. From the first grade, she brought home strong marks and took pride in them. Teachers saw a student who sat close to the front, did her work on time, and rarely needed reminders. She did not chase attention, but she earned quiet respect. Friends saw a girl who laughed easily in safe company, loved inside jokes, and protected the people she cared about. She chose a small circle, not a crowd, and in that circle she became a steady presence. During her teens, that sense of responsibility grew. At Hemphill High School, she rose to the top of her class. While others talked mostly about parties or leaving town, she focused on assignments, tests, and long-term plans. She joined school activities but never let them overshadow her grades. Teachers saw her as dependable. Classmates knew she was the one who would share notes, help study before an exam, and still hold her own dreams close to her chest. By the later years of high school, she had already chosen a path. She wanted a career in healthcare. Instead of waiting for college, she enrolled in a program that let her train as a certified nursing assistant while still in school. She studied anatomy and basic care, spent hours in clinical practice, and passed the state exam. When she graduated, she did so as an honor student who already held a professional credential and a clear idea of her next steps. After graduation, she enrolled at Stephen F. Austin State University, a regional university only a drive away but a world apart from her small hometown. She started college-level study with the goal of becoming a nurse and later a physician assistant. At the same time, she began working as a nursing assistant at a local facility. Her days filled with classes, her evenings and nights with shifts. The work involved bathing, feeding, and lifting older residents, and she handled it with patience and care. Residents at the nursing home warmed to her quickly. Staff remembered how she spoke gently and tried to preserve dignity in every task. She moved fast but never seemed rushed when a resident needed reassurance. One coworker, Taylor, became especially close. Taylor had a young daughter, and in their friendship, Livy almost took the role of a younger sister. They worked together, supported each other through long shifts, and gave one another a simple sense of family during difficult days. Shortly before the events that later drew public attention, her life followed a demanding but hopeful routine. She attended university classes, studied for exams, worked at the nursing home, and spent limited free time with her mother, grandmother, cousins, and a few close friends. Her dreams stayed clear. She wanted a stable home, a partner who respected her, and a career where she could keep helping vulnerable people. She did not look for drama. She looked for stability. The man who would change her path, Matthew Hoy Edgar, came from the same region and roughly the same world. He also grew up in Sabine County, surrounded by woods and small-town routines. By his early 20s, he had already married a woman named Montana and had 2 sons with her. People in the area knew him as a local man who drifted between jobs and sometimes drank heavily. He and Livy moved in overlapping social circles long before either of them became central to a criminal case. They met through mutual friends and local gatherings. At first, they were simply part of the same crowd. She was a teenager close to finishing high school. He was a married father. Over time, late-night messages and social media contacts shifted that connection. He paid attention to her, praised her maturity, and made her feel seen. For a young woman who wanted a serious future and a ready-made family, that attention carried weight, even though it came from a man who still lived with his wife. Those first private conversations took place in secret. He told her not to talk about them. She felt guilty and pulled back, not wanting to be the reason a family broke apart. For a while, she returned her focus to school and work. Then, his marriage fractured under the weight of repeated infidelity. He moved out, acknowledged to his wife that he had cheated, and presented himself to the outside world as a man starting over. Soon, he turned again to the younger woman who had already shown interest. When he approached her this time, he did so as someone who claimed to be free. He had 2 young sons who needed care. He said he wanted a new life and a real partner. Her desire for stability and family made that story persuasive. They started seeing each other more often. She helped with the boys, cooked, played, and tried to offer them consistency. For a time, it looked as if she had found what she wanted: a home, children to love, and an adult relationship built around shared responsibility. In that early period, there were real moments of happiness. They celebrated small milestones together, visited with his relatives, and spent quiet evenings at home. She decorated the boys' rooms, planned simple routines, and posted photos that suggested a normal blended family. From the outside, some people saw an older man with a younger partner and 2 children, struggling but trying to manage. From her perspective, she had invested her heart and energy in a serious relationship. The first signs of trouble appeared in small ways. He drank more than she liked and became moody when he did. Jealousy surfaced. He asked about her phone, questioned her friendships, and complained when she spent time with others. He alternated between charm and irritation, between warmth and sudden anger. She explained those changes as stress or alcohol, believing she could help him control his temper if she stayed patient and loving. Over time, those red flags turned into clear warnings. Arguments became more intense and sometimes physical. She sent him messages saying that her body hurt and asking why he kept putting his hands on her. She told him she feared him when he drank. She sent a cousin a photograph that showed her nose swollen and damaged and said it came from a fight with him. Friends noticed bruises, emotional exhaustion, and a level of tension that did not fit a healthy relationship. People close to her grew worried. Her coworker and housemate saw how he behaved when drunk and later described him as abusive in more than one sense. Her cousin told her that the pattern she was living through fit the cycle of domestic violence. Childhood friends urged her to leave and focus on nursing school and work. She heard their concerns but saw the children, the home she had tried to build, and the man who still apologized and promised to change. She stayed. Each cycle followed a similar path. An argument exploded, sometimes with physical violence. She thought about leaving. He cried, said he loved her, swore he would do better, and reminded her of the boys who had grown attached to her. She reminded herself that she had already invested years and energy, and that leaving would hurt more than staying. Again and again, she hoped the caring side of him would win over the violent side. The presence of his ex-wife, Montana, complicated everything further. At first, the two women were on opposite sides of a painful divide. Montana had lost her husband to a younger woman. Livy had stepped into a home that once belonged to another family. Over time, though, a strange form of friendship arose between them. Montana and Livy exchanged messages, spent time together, and began to treat each other as allies rather than rivals. Edgar himself later described them as close. For Livy, that bond felt like progress. She believed that the one person who understood Edgar's worst moments now stood beside her instead of against her. To others, the situation looked unstable and risky. Edgar still held emotional ties to his ex-wife. He moved back and forth between them in his words and actions. On her 19th birthday, he messaged Montana that he had cheated on Livy only with her and not with other women. When that truth surfaced, it caused deep pain and embarrassment for the young woman who had trusted him. By the autumn of 2020, the relationship had reached a critical point. The pattern of jealousy, drinking, physical violence, and temporary reconciliation had repeated many times. She had begun to pull away and even started to see another man who treated her more kindly. She wanted distance from Edgar and a chance to breathe. He struggled to accept that shift. For a man who liked control, the idea of losing a partner who helped with his children and his daily life felt like an attack. In the last weeks before Halloween, phone messages between them showed growing tension. He accused her of betrayal and abandonment. She wrote about fear and the need for change. Around them, the small community moved toward its usual seasonal gatherings, including a pre-Halloween party at the rural home of a friend named Bobby. That party would bring together Edgar, his ex-wife, his children, and the young woman who had tried and failed to change him. On the evening of October 30th, 2020, people gathered at Bobby's property to relax, listen to music, and drink. Among them were Livy, some of her friends, Edgar, Montana, and the two boys. At first, the scene looked like many other country gatherings. Children played. Adults moved between the yard and the house. Drinks passed from hand to hand. Conversations mixed people who had known each other for years. As hours passed and alcohol flowed, the atmosphere changed. Montana and Livy spent more time together, talking and laughing. From witnesses' descriptions, they appeared comfortable around each other. Edgar drank whiskey and beer and grew more withdrawn. He watched the two women who defined his romantic life stand together, and he did not control the situation. His frustration and jealousy simmered beneath the surface. Later that night, after some guests had already left, he learned that Livy might stay and sleep at Bobby's house. In his mind, this possibility joined with fears about another man in her life. His anger erupted. Outside near the vehicles, he confronted Montana. She later said he grabbed her by the neck and tried to choke her. Bobby saw him attack her car, kicking doors and striking windows. He restrained Edgar so that Montana and the children could leave safely. Livy also left the property. Montana drove with the children to the property where Edgar's mother and grandparents lived. Edgar followed there and confronted her again, still drunk and furious, still accusing her of siding with Livy against him. The argument continued on the yard and spilled into the house. Eventually he left, and she stayed inside with the children and his relatives. At that point, phone messages between them took over. He sent angry words, blamed her for the night, and hinted at violence. In those early morning messages, he painted himself as cornered by betrayal. He talked about harming people who, in his view, had ruined his life. Around 3:22 in the morning, he wrote that he was leaving and told her to come for the boys. Investigators later believed that he left the property with his cousin's truck, a rifle, and the intention to confront the young woman who had tried to move on from him. Sometime between that moment and dawn, his path crossed with hers again. She drove along Farm to Market Road 83, a quiet highway east of Hemphill. At some point, her car pulled to the shoulder and stopped. Her body position after death suggested that she remained in the driver's seat with her legs crossed, as if she had expected a conversation, not an attack. There, within a short distance of her front seat, a rifle fired a single shot that entered her neck and killed her. When authorities reconstructed events, they concluded that the rifle used in that shooting belonged to Edgar. Bullet fragments from the car and the body matched test rounds from the weapon recovered nearby. After the shot, her car sat silent on the roadside in the dark. A truck linked to Edgar's family came to a stop behind it. He ended up on the ground between the vehicles, curled on his side, covered in blood from an unexplained source, with no injuries that could account for it. A passing driver discovered the scene shortly after 5 in the morning. The driver noticed the car in an unusual position, stopped, and saw a young woman slumped over the steering wheel. The driver called for help. Emergency responders arrived, checked for signs of life, and found none. They confirmed that she was dead and saw the man on the ground behind her. They sent him by ambulance to a hospital and secured the roadside for investigators. News reached her mother through a friend, not through official channels. Darcy drove toward the flashing lights and patrol cars and tried to reach the officers. For a painful period, no one gave her a direct answer. Only when she saw the car and the way people avoided her eyes did she understand that her only child lay inside, already gone. In that moment, 19 years of plans and dreams broke apart on a 2-lane road. At the hospital, an investigator spoke with Edgar. He said he had drunk heavily at home and remembered lying on his porch, then waking up in an ambulance. He claimed that he did not know how he had reached the scene or what had happened there. Officers collected his clothing and noted the blood on his face and body. They saw that he had no serious wounds. Within hours, they placed him under arrest on a murder charge and began the detailed work of building a case. The autopsy confirmed what the scene had already suggested. A single shot from a high-powered rifle had entered the side of her neck and caused massive damage. The medical examiner also noted signs of blunt force injuries that matched earlier stories of physical abuse. Toxicology tests on her blood did not show anything that would have explained strange behavior on her part. The cause of death was straightforward and violent. Laboratory work on his clothing and the physical evidence added important details and some confusion. A small stain on his pants contained her blood. The blood on his face, however, came from an unidentified third person. On the rifle, investigators did not find usable fingerprints or clear DNA. Some objects from the scene carried mixed DNA profiles that did not match either him or her. The prosecution later argued that these gaps did not erase the larger picture. The defense built much of its argument around them. Digital evidence strengthened the case against him. Phone records and message histories showed his movements the night of the killing and the words he chose in the hours before it. In one crucial message, sent long before the passerby found the car, he replied to a question about where she was by stating that she was already dead. Investigators saw that as proof that he had been present at the moment of death. Voice calls, location data, and timelines pointed in the same direction. Detectives also examined the possibility that Montana had taken part more directly. Some people who supported him tried to shift blame toward her. Investigators interviewed her many times, checked her account against phone data, and used a polygraph as another tool. They concluded that she had remained at the grandparents' property after going inside and that no evidence placed her at the scene on the roadside. Their primary focus stayed on the man who had admitted drinking heavily, who had sent threatening messages, and who had appeared beside the body. Legal delays then collided with emotional urgency. Pandemic conditions slowed court operations across the state. Grand juries met less often. Texas law limited how long authorities could keep a person in jail without an indictment. After about 90 days, a judge had to consider bond. Despite the district attorney's arguments and the family's fears, the court granted bond set at $50,000. Edgar left jail under electronic monitoring, returning to the same small community where the killing had occurred. For the family, his release felt like another blow. They saw him around town. In one incident, her mother encountered him at a store and confronted him in grief and anger. She threw items in his direction and shouted accusations. He reported the confrontation, and officers arrested her. Prosecutors later dropped the charges, but the moment revealed how deep the pain ran on all sides and how small the town remained. In January 2022, the case finally reached trial. He arrived at the courthouse with a protective vest and sat at the defense table. Prosecutors described a pattern of domestic violence and a night of jealousy and rage that ended with a rifle shot. They showed the jury photographs of injuries, the crime scene, and the roadside. They presented the autopsy findings, the ballistic match between the bullet fragments and the rifle, and the text messages that tracked the path from argument to homicide. Witnesses described her as a kind, ambitious young woman who had wanted nothing more than a stable home and a career in healthcare. They described him as a jealous, controlling partner who drank heavily and used his hands to enforce his will. The lead investigator explained the significance of the blood on his pants, the placement of the vehicles, and the time-stamped message that declared her dead before any official notification. The defense tried to plant seeds of doubt. They stressed the lack of fingerprints and DNA on the rifle, the mixed DNA on some items, and the unknown source of blood on his face. They suggested that another person could have handled the weapon or even fired it. They returned again and again to his statement that he blacked out and did not remember the critical moments, hinting that without clear memory, intent might be missing or someone else might be responsible. As the trial unfolded, another twist appeared. After attending the first part of the proceedings, he failed to show up in court. His ankle monitor battery went dead and he vanished. The judge allowed the trial to continue in his absence as the law permitted. The jury stayed in place, heard closing arguments, and retired to deliberate. They returned with a verdict of guilty on the murder charge and recommended a sentence of 99 years in prison and a fine. He now became both a convicted murderer and a fugitive. Law enforcement agencies at local, state, and federal levels worked together to locate him. He appeared on lists of most wanted fugitives. Tips came in, some from faraway states, but in the end, he stayed close to home. In December 2022, officers watched a house near his grandparents' property. saw a man step onto the back porch and recognized him. They moved in and arrested him without incident, ending almost a year on the run. With him back in custody, the court scheduled a formal sentencing hearing. In early January 2023, he stood before a judge who repeated the 99-year sentence directly to him. After that, the court allowed the family to speak. Her grandmother described the girl who had earned top grades, completed nursing assistant training, and started college. Her mother chose to let a recording of her daughter's graduation speech speak for her. The sound of a proud teenager talking about her future filled the courtroom one last time. He then entered the state prison system to begin serving his sentence. Records showed that he would not even become eligible for parole until decades later. For him, daily life narrowed to cells, counts, and long-term confinement. For her family and friends, life became a long process of grieving and remembering. They set up a scholarship in her name to help other local students pursue education, especially in healthcare, so that her passion for caring work would continue in others. The case drew national attention. Media outlets reported on the killing, the trial, his disappearance, and his capture. A television program devoted to true crime included her case in an episode, focusing on his claim of an alcohol-induced blackout while also telling the story of her short life. For the family, every public mention brought both pain and comfort, keeping her name alive while forcing them to relive the worst moments. Over time, her story served as an example of how domestic violence built slowly and then exploded. It showed how control and jealousy often hid behind declarations of love. It showed how hard it was for victims to leave when children and shared towns tied them to abusive partners. It also showed how delays in the legal system could place dangerous people back into communities before trials had a chance to begin. Her family and many supporters hoped that sharing her experience would help others recognize danger earlier. They encourage people to take seriously any signs of control, isolation, sudden rage, or physical harm in intimate relationships, and to reach out for help. They supported the spread of information about local shelters, hotlines, and organizations that helped people leave abusive situations, both in East Texas and elsewhere. As people continued to tell the story of Livy Lewis, they kept the focus on who she had been. A bright, hard-working young woman who loved her family, carried tenderness into her work, and believed deeply in the value of stability and care. The narrative closed with a quiet thank you to everyone who carried her memory forward, and a gentle invitation for listeners to respond with respect, pay attention to the signs of abuse around them, and support those who might be living in fear. In that way, her life, though cut short, continued to protect others.